The Golden Grimm by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 7. Say Your Piece. Is it luck or fate? Say your piece. They couldn't linger in Mount Glen much longer. Tempting though the notion might be, Naruto knew it simply wasn't feasible to hide here indefinitely. Not only was the Dead City an obvious place for Osman to search, and he would, but anyone who did find them lurking here would doubly think the worst of him. Alpha and Grimm might not care, but any human or faunus would probably attack him on sight. Besides, Lisa was going stir crazy here. Poor girl was losing her mind, or perhaps she already had. A faint smile touched his face at the thought anyone willing to follow a living Grimm magnet through hell and back must have a few screws loose. Then again, he supposed they were all mad here. It wasn't as if he could just waltz into Vale. By now there were surely warrants out for his arrest. He'd be set upon the second he set foot in the city. Covertly, he couldn't just let Lisa waltz into Vale without protection. She'd never make it back to Vale alone. There were miles upon miles of grim-infected wilderness between here and Vale, which left him at a bit of an impasse. "What do you think, buddy?" He cast the weathered blue eye down at his current companion. "I think it's time for us to move on." The Ursa Major chuffed once, but made no effort to lift its head from where it lay in his lap. "Huh," the blonde shorted. "Fair enough. It was a prime specimen even among its kind, a mighty bitch of a beast larger than he was tall, bearing powerful paws and mighty jaws. Tainted white spires jutted from its spine akin to those of a hedgehog, promising pain to anyone fool enough to leap onto its back. He still didn't know why it had come to him, much less cornered him in the first place. He supposed it was possible that the bear thought he was one of its cubs. Perhaps it sensed his distress. Maybe it was simply curious. Who could say? Unfortunately, its presence created another problem for him. "You're not gonna let me up, are ya?" Lazy red eyes flicked up to his palm. Still laid atop its masked skull, it made another noise, rather reminiscent of a low whine. "Come on now," Naruto sighed, but the sound lacked rancor. "Don't complain. I've been sitting here for an hour now. My legs are falling asleep, you know." It chuffed once, radiating satisfaction and stubbornness. It wasn't letting him up without a fight. Seemed he didn't have much of a choice in the matter. Forgetting his ability to tame the Grimm, it seemed a bit of peace and a few head pats did the trick all the same. Casper poked its little head out of his shoulder. Its mask prevented any such display of emotion, but he suspected the little geist wasn't much pleased with him. All right. He touched the small skull with a finger. "I'll do the same for you, but don't tell Alpha." A pause now as he reconsidered the matter further. "Or Rim, pretty sure she wouldn't take kindly to food. Speak of the devil and she shall appear." Naruto grunted a little as sharp teeth sank into the meat of his shoulder. His Ursa didn't so much as bat an eyelash. Rim was ruler here. All Grimm in the city were subordinate to her. It still did nothing to change the fact that she was currently chewing on him like a candy bar. "Rim? Mm-hmm." She blinked up at him, mouth muffled against his flesh. "Bonjour." Something he wondered if the gods were laughing at him. It certainly felt like it. "Why are you trying to eat me?" "Still hungry." She gnawed on him a bit more before relinquishing her hold. But Alpha said, "Look sad." Her grin was filled with teeth. "So I wanted to cheer you up." A thorn of alarm pricked at his heart. "And where is she?" "Hunting." The grimmified girl whistled innocently. Blue eyes narrowed to azure slits. "Rim?" "I'm gonna hunt too. I'll bring you back a deer. No, 3. I won't lose to her." Naruto tried to grab her as she danced back. "Wait, how are you going to? Holy crap!" His words trailed off as her body suddenly shifted in towering shadow, leaving him to gape as dragon hurtled away. "Sure, she can change back if she wants," he muttered to himself. "Of course she can, because I totally needed a pet dragon. Still, maybe she had the right of things. Best just to focus on here and now. The future could be dealt with later." Planting a boot on a bit of crumbling masonry, he leveled himself upright and bit back a sigh. There was too many ghosts here for his liking, a constant reminder of the spectacular failure he and Merlot had wrought. Even now, it nagged at him like an old wound, not quite healed. Back then, the experiment had been going so well. The Grimm were placed at the time, docile, until something stirred them up. Now the rest was, as they say, history. Mount Glen had fallen. Hundreds were dead. Merlot was gone, and he'd recently become a fugitive, running from one of the most powerful men in Remnant. There was the Queen of the Grimm, one who ruled them, and he knew next to nothing about her. Was this Salem person to blame for Mount Glen? It was so tempting to cast the burden of guilt at her feet, even if he knew he shouldn't. This was already his teacher's tomb. It would not be his. Well, he muttered, nothing to be gained by moping about. Come on. With one hand he patted the Ursa that had taken a liking to him. Let's find Lisa. And maybe something to drink. Summer was hearing the voice again. They taunted her each waking moment, whispered in her sleep, tormented her at every turn. What had begun was little more than whispers in Naruto's absence had soon escalated until it was all she could do to drown them out. They clawed at her like the paws of some fell beast, threatening to drag her down if she slipped. A single comment, one that burned in the back of her brain in a searing brand. Take the girl, the chant filled her mind. Take the girl, take the girl, take the girl. No! She scowled at her reflection in the mirror. I'm still me. Her reflection smiled right back. Are you? Summer smashed the fist into the glass. It shattered with a laugh. Found some booze. The gods, Lisa considered, were good. Really? The journalist looked up, frazzled hair peeking over the bar counter from where she'd sprawled herself in a dilapidated apartment. Is it still good? Maybe. Naruto considered the green glass bottle and shrugged as his companion regarded the rosy red liquid within. No idea. It's one of the only intact bottles I could find. His other hand swept out, spinning a pair of relatively intact glasses towards her. She caught one nimbly, white knuckles in her grasp, only to realize his expression had gone pensive. I'll understand you don't want any. Hell no. After everything we've been through, crack that baby open. Naruto hesitated all of a moment. Well, are you sure? She all but ripped it from his grasp. Gimme! In short order, they'd propped a pair of seats up and done just that. Lisa filled her glass to the brim and knocked him. Come on, we deserve to celebrate. On a whim, he decided to humor her. What's the occasion? We're alive. What occasion do we need? She pursed her lips, considering the matter for a moment. Where are the girls? They usually stick to you like glue. Alpha went out on patrol, something about finding a new pack. As for Rim, his lips pursed as a distant roar sounded. I'm pretty sure she went hunting. She looked past him to the shadow lurking outside. And that bear's still following you around? Yeah, Naruto followed her gaze. Don't really know what to do with it. I'll figure it out. Meh, fair enough. She grinned. Drink then. To the Golden Grimm. It was an odd toast, but for some reason, Naruto didn't deny her. Ospen seldom felt the need for violence these days. He liked to think himself above such base instincts, but now was not such a time. You let him walk into Mount Glen. He considered the call he just received, was currently receiving, and considered crushing the receiver in his fist. A place teeming with Grimm. What did you think would happen? We're terribly sorry, sir. The captain of Vale's guard apologized profusely, voice crackling through the other end of the line. We'll send a detachment. No, don't bother. He waved a hand, pitching a bridge of his nose with the other. If I know him, he'll be too much for you. He stood and snatched up his cane. This is a job for Huntsman. More aptly, a job for him. How much had they drunk? Naruto no longer remembered, but that bottle was looking a fair bit emptier than before, and an almost pleasant buzz had begun to overtake his senses. He couldn't manage much more than that these days. Somehow his body burnt off liquor before he could truly get drunk, yet more proof he wasn't entirely human. You're mad. Lisa wasn't fairly so well. Her face was flushed as she guffed openly. Peace between people and the Grimm. Is that even possible? Of course they'd started talking. It was inevitable. They once said the same about the four cities, yet they worked out. And is it mad to reach for new heights? To long for something more? Something better? The passion of his goal took him by the teeth. That's what I aspire to. He leaned forward, capturing her gaze with his. What I strive for, what I crave, a better world, true peace, understanding, if not necessarily between us and the Grimm, then at least coexistence. He pursed his lips as the next word eluded him. Surely, there's nothing wrong with that. Not saying there is. Lisa swirled her wine in her glass, watching it sway intently. But people won't see it that way. Then screw 'em. Sometimes you have to rock the boat a bit to make them understand, even if they hate me. I won't stop. His hands clenched into fists atop the table. I will persevere. I must. And why is that? He dared a smile. If I don't do this, then who will? Lisa regarded him for a long moment. What? He frowned at her. I think my dad would have liked you. Naruto frowned. You never did tell me who your father was. Lisa looked up from her mug, cheeks flushed. I got my last name from my mother. My pa's name, well, she looked away, tried to whistle, and failed to in her inebriated state. Shit, she cursed escaped her. Guess there's no point in hiding it, not if we're going to be working together. Well, that wasn't ominous at all. His eyes narrowed. Well, don't keep me in suspense. Out with it. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. Her shoulders slumped. He was a real wacko. Suppose I got my curiosity from him? Something stilled in Naruto's soul, turning cold and dark. No. His tongue betrayed him. Is that so? No, no. Yeah, you're gonna laugh, she grimaced. His name's weird. No, no, no. Lisa heard none of it. Merlot, she said at last. His name was Merlot. You gotta be kidding me. Naruto crashed back with a guff. His seat failed him in that instant. One of the legs broke and he fell atop it, all but dragging himself down. Lisa leaned after him to laugh at his plight. Karma was swift. Tipsy as she was, she lost her balance almost immediately and toppled with a shriek. Her body crashed atop his. Naruto stiffened. Such a silly man. Lisa patted his cheek. Something flashed in her eyes. Handsome, too. She leaned in. Her lips were warm against his chest. Naruto bit his lip to try and stifle a smile. He failed spectacularly. It was just too much. My face is up here. Aw, she slurred, squinting up at him. No fair. Three of you. He'd never given much thought to romance before, if only because he simply hadn't the time. Summer was happily married and with children to boot. He'd given the ex-huntress her life back when she was fit to live to her heart's content, or so he hoped. On the other matter of such freedom, he wasn't about to force himself on the girl. Grimm girls. He's inadvertently freed. He'd inadvertently freed. Lisa was, or Lisa, and also very drunk. He might be seen as a monster by many, but that didn't make him one. Far from it. With a long-suffering sigh, he rose, pulling her upright. Lisa followed him. Bed? For you, maybe. No. As he looked on, she threw a fit, crossing her arm and huffing as a petulant child might. Not sleepy, don't wanna. The ghost of a smile graced his lips. Sorry, not asking. Up you go. Quick as a flash, he dipped down and swept her up into his arms. Whee! Well, he should have seen that coming. With her head now all but cradled against his chest, Lisa's drunken stupor evaporated into a gaggle of giggles. Near delirious in her glee, she clung onto him for dear life. Princess Scary, she sang out. I always wanted to be held like this, but no, everyone said I was too boyish. Ha! She kicked her legs in the air, nearly sending them sprawling once more. Look who's laughing now. I ain't no tomboy. Naruto experienced a sudden premonition of dread. Oi, don't you dare. Do these look boyish to you? Somehow she managed to get an arm free. By the time he realized what she intended, it was too late. Fabric ripped, buttons flew through the air and sprayed across his face, peppering whiskered cheeks. A flash of deep indigo graced his eyes, accompanied by the creamy expanse of pale skin. See, she cupped her breast, fondling them. Perfect, reasonable size. A saucy smile touched her lips. I'm not flat. Naruto most certainly did not want to see, but the sight had been engraved upon his mind. They really were quite nice. Right, he choked out. We'll talk about this later, when you're sober. She sniffed. Promise? Yeah, yeah. He kissed her forehead. Sweet dreams. Ginger steps brought him to her cot. He needn't have worried. Lisa didn't resist. In short order, he laid her within and tucked in against a bundle of blankets. Before long, the faint yet telltale sound of snoring reached his ears. From there, he took one step back, then another, followed by a third. Still, she made no move to rise. Naruto heaved out a breath. Finally! A howl rent the air, followed by dozens more. He jolted to his feet. What in blazes? It was not the hunter's veil that had come for him. Honestly, Naruto would have preferred it thus. Bowling out into the ruined country yard, he recognized the telltale white and blue of Atlas warriors even from a distance. Strange then that there were only two of them. Most huntsman teams were known to operate in four-person cells. He noticed the faunus first, if only because it was impossible not to. Stay! They stood at the forefront of the horde, weapon drawn in one hand while the other thrust a finger forward. Before that singular command, none of the Grimm budged. He could see them straining against some unseen force, all but chomping at the bit. Sweat slicked down the man's brow, his arms quivering with the effort to hold them in place. What in the world? Ultimately, it was his companion that caught the eye. She was certainly well fit, while the poor faunus looked fit to sole his trousers. Her smile wavered not once. He took her in at a glance. This tall, young, muscular woman, her brown hair wrapped in a short ponytail, dark of skin and bright of eyes. She reminded him of milk chocolate, much like her companion. She too wore an Atlesian specialist uniform, although hers consisted primarily of an open white or one-sleeved crop jacket bearing dark blue accents, shoulder flaps, and collar flung over a dark gray shirt. Silver vaporance seethed her forearms, contrasting a deep red pelt wrapped around her white pants. Oddly enough, she hadn't any shoes to speak of, save for some bandages wrapping her feet. A silver hoop glinted merely on her right ear. All in all, it looked like she could easily be bench press an Ursum or three and win handedly. One-handedly, the hammer held lazily in her offhand only further to hint at her strength. She saw him then, or perhaps she'd seen him all along and simply held her tongue until this moment. "Hello," the newcomer waved cheerily. "Mind calling off your beasties? We come in peace. Aren't you afraid?" "Terrified, really?" A faint warble rose. "I'd really rather not die, and Marrow can't hold them much longer." As he looked on, a bead of sweat ran down her brow. "Little help here. You need to calm down," he hissed out. "They're reacting to your stress. Just breathe." The woman grimaced. "I really hope the rumors were right about you." He could have answered them in any number of ways. A retort, maybe, or a long-winded speech, perhaps, but the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. Seeing is believing and all that, so he gave them reason to believe. Casting out with his gift, he began prodding the Grimm around them, urging them to calm. It was impossible to truly control so many minds at once, let alone change them. But nudging them was another matter. It was the work of several minutes, but he succeeded. In hindsight, he'd soon wish he hadn't. The very moment he did, the woman stepped forward, clasped him by the shoulder, and drew him into a crushing hug. His face landed right in her bosom. Heat surged through his face, turning his whiskered cheeks a bright, rosy red. "I'm Elm," she set him down with a grin. "We've come to bargain." Marrow palmed his face. "Don't mind her. She has absolutely no tact." "Piss on that," she scoffed. "Long story short, Alice is willing to offer you sanctuary. What do you say?" Naruto pinched the brow of his nose. "Of course you are. What's next? You got hidden cameras on you or something?" Ironwood watched the footage intently from his command post. A small smile touched his lined face. "Remarkable. Previews." Lisa's face was redder than a rose. "About last night. Can we never speak of that again?" "Too late. Remembering everything." Lisa made angry Lisa noises. Elm offered a lower whistle. "Stronger than you look." Alpha came tearing through a door, silver eyes bright in her skull. "Enemies!" "It's the Grimm," she sniffed once, scent in the air. "Something stirring them up." Naruto's mind bleated in a panic. "Not again." "Where are you going?" Grimm was surprisingly easy to placate. "Just stay in that form. I won't be able to feed you if you're 3 stories tall again." She tilted her head. "Our long-awaited meeting has come at last." End of chapter 7.